Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We have to ask the question, has Beryl got his knickers in a twist? Has he lost his mind, or is he just so confused he doesn't know what he's talking about? It could, of course, be all three. Just last week, he and the rest of the SNP were mentioning that if, after the next general election, or Holyrood election, the SNP held the most seats, not the majority, simply the most, they were the biggest party, then that would be taken as a mandate to begin negotiations for an independent Scotland. Sheer madness, of course. Lunacy. But that's what they want to believe. Of course, it will never happen. But today, he's discussing the same plan, and he's saying it's a majority of seats. It seems the plan has changed and nobody's announced it. Did he misspeak, or is he literally so stupid he doesn't understand his own party's policy? I leave that for you, dear viewer. But we will take a look at the story, see what's going on, and see why it is so bad an idea that, and seriously, even Pete Wishart says it's a non-starter. And he's come up with some pretty crazy ideas himself. Let's go. So confusion as SNP Westminster leader contradicts his own Indy plan. He's obviously not the brightest button in the box, we know that. But when he can't even stick to the plan he's already announced, what hope is there? So the SNP's Westminster leader has added to confusion about his party's independent strategy after repeatedly contradicting it on television. Stephen Flynn twice said that if the SNP won a majority of Scotland's seats at the next year's general election, it would constitute a mandate for independence talks, when it quite clearly won't. However, last week he and Humza Yousaf co-authored a motion to the SNP conference saying that the SNP only required to win the most seats, which could be less than half. Now, if you're not winning half the seats, it's because you're not getting half the votes. And indeed, it's even possible to win more than half the seats and not have quite half the vote. So anything that does not involve an absolute referendum has no legitimacy. So they're talking absolute rubbish. They can do what they want, they can say what they like, but there's no legality to it. And the British government just won't recognise it. So it's a pointless exercise. But then so much of what the SNP do is fairly pointless. So we won't, won't dwell on that. But anyway, party advisors also confirmed last week that the new threshold was a plurality, not a majority. Meaning the SNP simply winning more seats than any other party. And this was a watering down of the position in June when the bar was a majority of seats, which they know they are unattainable. And the way it's going, though, even getting the majority of seats, the most seats rather than a majority, is also increasingly unlikely. The latest idea has been dismissed as crackpot by opposition parties, as in theory the SNP could claim it had a mandate, even if it hemorrhaged support, which of course it is. It's losing supporters left, right, and centre. The party won 48 of Scotland's 59 constituencies at the 2019 election, and that will most definitely not be the case this time. With boundary changes reducing the total to 57 seats, a majority would be 29 MPs, and a plurality could be in the low 20s, around half the SNP's 2019 tally. The SNP MP, which is likely to be whereabouts they are. It's going to be very close with Labour, one or two Labour swings. Swings to Labour, that is. And the SNP could be out. SNP MP Pete Wishart also said it was not credible for the SNP to try and assert some move towards independence if you're not carrying the majority of people with you. Now, there you go. That's the line. If even Pete Wishart says it's not credible, then I'm going to suggest it's absolutely not credible. Let's face it, Wishart himself has come up with some pretty Looney Tunes ideas. And even he's had to admit that they're rubbish. He keeps regurgitating the same old thing that Nicola Sturgeon put back on the shelf because she knew it was a poison chalice. There you go, very next line I've just seen. Mr Wishart is an advocate of the de facto referendum, in which the goal would be to win the majority of votes, a plan floated by the then First Minister Nicola Sturgeon last year, which he then soon plucked and put back on the shelf because she knew if she did not win the majority of votes, then the opposition party would say, well, there you go, you lost. That's it, you've had your referendum. Your rules, you've lost. In their motion to conference next month, Mr Flynn and the First Minister asked delegates to agree that if the SNP wins the most seats at the general election in Scotland, the Scottish Government is empowered to begin immediate negotiations with the UK Government to give democratic effect to Scotland becoming an independent country. They'll turn up to some meeting room and they'll sit there going, oh, we're all expecting. They'll put their pen, their pencil, their rubber, their little calculator, their ruler, their notebook, their spare notebook, their gonk, their spare lucky gonk. They'll sit there like that, waiting, looking at each other. They'll be here soon. They'll be here soon, you know. And 5 o'clock will come and they'll go, and nobody will have turned up because no one from the British government is going to talk to them about it because it's just not going to happen. So they'll have to pack up all their stuff in their nice new shiny briefcase and head back to Holyrood, fuming that nobody in the British government was taking them seriously. And that's because this cannot even be remotely described as a serious proposition. Interviewed on the Politics Hub with Sophie Ridge on Sky News, Mr Flynn was asked if the majority of people in Scotland vote for parties that don't support independence, how is that a mandate for independence? And Mr Flynn replied, what we're saying is quite clearly that in a Westminster context, it's done by the proportionality of seats. So we're saying if we win the majority of seats, which I'm very confident that we will in the general election next year, then that will be a mandate for us to give democratic effect to independence. Sheer rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Mr Ridge queried the comment. He said, you're saying the most seats, not a majority, isn't it? And Mr Flynn replied, yes, of course. You know, if the UK government wants us to come to us and say, well, that's fine, you can have your independence. He said, I'd love that. What I would expect to happen is for them to come to the table and have that grown-up democratic discussion about how we empower the people of Scotland to determine their own future. Well, they have. In 2014, they had an election. They had a referendum, in fact. And they said no. There you go. They've had their say. He said, now that may well be a transfer of powers from Westminster to Holyrood to hold on to independence referendum. That may well be just to be agreeing to an independence referendum. But, you know, when it comes to this big constitutional issue, I think the question must be for the Labour Party and the Conservatives, at what point are they going to allow the people of Scotland to determine their own future? They do. They already do. You just don't like the fact that they don't agree with you. The Aberdeenshire South MP then repeated his majority comment. He said, what would be the standing on winning a majority of seats? And I say, I'm very confident that we would do that. We would seek to give implementation to our manifesto on that basis. And so he said, on the majority of seats, he's changed his mind. Pamela Nash, Chief Executive of Scotland and Union, said, Humza Yousaf has moved the goalposts so many times that his own politicians don't know what game they're supposed to be playing anymore. What's even more remarkable, she said, is that Stephen Flynn signed the motion with Humza, but clearly doesn't understand the proposal himself. Of course not. They're not very bright. That's the problem. Scotland is being run by people who are not very bright. And that's to put it kindly. I would think absolutely moronic, actually. They are absolutely so stupid. This confusion in the SNP is a reflection of the party's worsening poll ratings, but these attempts to gameplay the next election are nothing short of dangerous. Voters must be able to express their views on all important issues at the forthcoming election, including improving energy costs and security, boosting the economy and creating jobs, and addressing the cost of living crisis. It's time for the people's priorities, not those of the SNP. Quite right too. But he is an absolute moron. Mr. Potato Head. Honestly, he hasn't got a clue what he's saying. But it's very hard, isn't it, when you don't know what this week's plan is, because it chops and changes so often. We're going to do this, then we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Then we're going to go back to that plan we abandoned. Why? Well, we'll give it another go. Why? Because nothing else. We've got nothing else. The cupboard is bare. Our ideas cupboard has run out. and we've got no one with the intelligence to make new ideas. Unbelievable, isn't it? Anyway, I shall stop there, leave Beryl to his fortune, and I will come up and we'll round off. Now, I have a plan that could lead to Scottish independence, and that is for the SNP to run Scotland well, to have an excellent NHS with waiting lists cut massively, to have schools that are centres of excellence, that the pupils leave with a plethora of qualifications, ready to go out into the world, educated and qualified, ready to go into business, into industry, ready to push into further education, ready to have an excellent further education reputation, unlike the one it once had and which has now been destroyed. Build its industry, build its infrastructure, have roads worthy of the name, have excellent rail communications, have a communications infrastructure, make somewhere Scotland can be proud to be, clean, low crime, low alcohol misuse, low drug misuse. Have all these things. Show the people of Scotland and the people in the rest of the United Kingdom that Scotland under the SNP could be a good place, could be an excellent place, and that the SNP are worthy to have an independent Scotland. Show people this is what the SNP can do. Show them that this is what Scotland can be. And they may even vote for independence. But until you do, they'll look at the schools that are falling apart, they'll look at the NHS that's falling apart, they'll look at the dirty streets, the dead teenagers, the misuse of everything, the crumbling infrastructure, and they'll look at the SNP and go, no, none of that, thank you. And you'll never, ever get independence that way. I shall stop there. Thank you very much. I shouldn't really be giving them ideas. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and don't vote for this bunch of clowns who don't even know what their own policies are. Bye.